everything's working.
It's preparing the live stream.
When I talk, you can't hear my fan in the back, can you?
Oh, hi, Christy.
Hi.
Can we hear? Not hear?
Can you hear the fan in the back? No, right?
I don't hear anything.
Okay, good. It's burning.
I'm old and I have hearing issues. Ask someone younger.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure.
I don't need to wear my hearing thing when we do this like this.
Oh, good.
I hope we don't need to do this forever. This is really
Well,
a good way to run a meeting.
I don't think it's too much longer, but I don't know.
It's not the same as being able to do it in person.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's some things that are better this way, but all in all, I don't think it's better.
Yeah.
Okay, Ashley Mendez is our Lou Mendez.
Okay.
So we can move him to a participant.
He belongs to us.
Yes.
And Susan belongs to
And Susan Oakley is our consultant for landscaping.
So okay, Susan Oakley. Okay, got it. Okay. Looks like we are live on YouTube right now.
Yeah.
Diane, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Lou.
Okay, good. No, just checking.
Excellent.
Thing, just I'm going to open up with the national anthem. I want to make sure that everybody.
So good to have you, Lou.
Well, I
Hello.
try.
Yeah.
I try, Betty Ann. I try very hard.
You succeed.
Okay, it's 7 o'clock. We're missing a planning board member, but we have a quorum, I believe, so we can get started. Good evening, everyone. This is a regularly scheduled planning board meeting of the Village of Mamaroneck. Today is June 10th. We all hope that this finds everyone well. So we have a relatively short agenda tonight. The first item on the agenda is approval of minutes from April 14th, 2020. In the review of these minutes, we uncovered that there's a section of discussion that was left out of the transcript. So we're not going to vote on these minutes tonight, but we will just comment on a couple of typos and a couple of changes, and we'll have to address them at another time. So I'll start, and other members of the planning board. I want to introduce Ashley Lai, who is our planning consultant, filling in for Greg Cutler, who has left the employee of the village. So we now have Ashley, and she is our Zoom master and our, I guess, acting village planner. Is that an accurate statement? Welcome.
Thank you.
Could you remove the minute of the agenda?
Yes, I can.
And that way we get to see more participants in the meeting. There we go. We get to see all members of the planning board who are present. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to look at the minutes. The first page, there's a typo. Stu Messenger's name is spelled incorrectly. I don't have anything until bottom of page 3. The last paragraph, the second line, it should say, I just want to confirm that this is correct, not conform. Anybody else have anything on page 3 or before? I don't have anything till page 7. Cindy, you're muted. Cindy, you're muted.
Okay, page 4, the middle of the page, my comment that starts the first sentence of the 4th paragraph should be stating, not starting, 3 existing access roads.
You're the one who uncovered by watching the tape that there's a section missing. Can you point Betty Ann in the right direction?
Well, that's on page 7,
Oh,
so
okay.
we're not there yet.
We're not. Okay, good. Okay, I don't have anything till page 7.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. Now, at the bottom of the page, this is where, to me, it sort of started to not make sense, the words. And I know you're using Zoom transcription, so I know this is a machine trying to figure out what we're saying. So I'm going to try to speak more clearly, because clearly some of the things I say get written as inaudible. But I'm not sure that they're full thoughts here. And Cindy's comment at the bottom of the page, the last sentence should say the 50 unit was not viable. So we're presuming the 25 would also not be viable. But as far as the paragraph ahead of that, I'm not 100% certain what's missing there.
Well, I actually listened to that tape, and Kathy, what you said, I could tell what you were saying. It said, instead of inaudible, you said as an egress.
Oh, okay. I would have filled that word in just by reading the context, but.
And it really was the middle of the page where I found a lot was missing, including comments by Mr. Spalzino, which I thought would be important to have in there.
Okay, so that's where the missing area is.
That's where I saw that. But let me go to the top of the page. The first line saying it's possible for you to make, I think that should be impossible for you to make findings about the alternatives because the cost analysis is not complete, is incomplete. But anyway, there's so much missing on that page. So
We'll revisit that.
okay.
On that page,
I'm done with that page.
on the next page, the third paragraph in Mr. Messenger's comment, you're not saying go ahead with thing. I don't know if that means with anything, with things, with this project.
Okay.
Doesn't make sense in the context. And then I don't have a comment till the next page. The bottom half, like right below center, my comment then starts right now, the resolution calls for a public hearing. And the second paragraph there, we have, and it's listed as inaudible, that is a question. That word should be question. And I do not have anything else as it stands right now.
I don't either.
Okay.
Good.
Okay. All right, so we're going to table these. Betty Ann won't be with us at the next meeting, so we may get to these in July. Oh my God, it's July already. Okay. That brings us to the next item on the agenda, which is an application for a project at 355 Phillips Road. The project is before us for site plan review and a special permit for residences in the commercial district. And when we last left, I'm sorry, when we last left this project, we had two issues. And we can discuss both of those tonight, but one is the legal aspect of the project with regards to the 50-foot setback from the river, and the other one is the SEQA type determination. We've already typed it. So let's start with the legal issue. We had asked Ms. Mason to sort of give us a little help here. We also received a very thorough memo from the applicant's attorney with regards to these issues. So let me see if I can summarize this, and I would ask Ms. Mason to jump in here, okay? There's two sections of the village code that are, one is section 240-30, which is the section that deals with the management of the coastal zone. And that's where it mentions a permit. We normally call these our wetlands permits, correct?
Yep.
The other section is Village Code 342-50, subsection B5. And that deals with a permit for residences in the C1 in the commercial district and the transit overlay district, which this particular parcel is in the transit overlay district, and it's also zoned commercially. And Ms. Mason's memo to us basically said that the 34250 does refer to 24030 with regards to any building, and I'm going to read this. Permit from the planning board is required for any building, structure, or parking area otherwise requiring subdivision or site plan approval that will be wholly or in part constructed, altered, enlarged, or enclosed within 50 feet from the mean. So the structure that's on the site now is within 50 feet. I think everyone is in agreement with that statement. And it goes on to say that if a permit is required, an applicant can qualify for the permit only if the building, structure, or parking area is 1, water dependent according to the village's LWRP, or 2, cannot be located elsewhere on the property. Is that correct?
That's 240-30. That's correct.
That's the water, the coastal management section.
That's the permit under exactly 240.
And section 34250B5, which is the permit that applies to this particular project because it's the residences in a commercial district, references 240-30.
So I wouldn't necessarily read them as separate permits. I would read 34250B5 as an essentially usurping 240-30. So it's not that you have to get you have to get a special permit under 34250, but that provision of 34250 is really reflecting on 240-30. So it's prohibiting 240-30. So it's adding limitations to 240-30.
Okay. So we have one permit, one application for one permit, and that permit is for special permit to construct residences in a commercial district and also the transit overlay.
Mhm.
Okay.
So,
We are all in agreement there. Now the question is the project, does the project as proposed by the applicant fall within this 50-foot buffer zone? And if so, is it considered water dependent?
so this is a little bit confusing. Under 240-30, they would be, well, I'm not going to comment on 355 Phillips Park, so let me take that back. They wouldn't be. What would happen under 240-30 is if they were constructing, altering, enlarging, and closing within that 50-foot buffer, any building, structure, parking area, they would have to come before the planning board to get a special permit. And you could only grant the special permit under those two scenarios that we discussed earlier. So under 342-50B5, that limits those scenarios to you are only permitted to get that permit if you are a water dependent structure. But the problem here is that that is a zoning ordinance. So if that's a zoning ordinance 342-50, which is now superseding 240-30, that's a determination for the building inspector to have made. So the building inspector made his determination, did not feel that they were required to get a permit under 342-50. So it's a little bit dicey in terms of what's the planning board's responsibility with this, but our understanding is that since it's a zoning determination, it's really within the purview of the building inspector.
Okay. So here we are. The applicant purposely designed the project so that the addition of a second floor would not penetrate the 50-foot buffer. They're arguing that the water dependency clause doesn't apply, but they need a permit because it's residences in the commercial district.
So they would have, yes, they would have to get that. Well, they would have to, even if they weren't in, so under 240-30, even if they weren't in the commercial district, they'd have to get that permit. But because they are in that commercial district, they were controlled by 342-50.
Right.
And 342-50A does require a special permit for residence uses, and they are constructing 6 residences. So as far as I can tell, 342-50 does require a permit from the planning board. Is that right?
That's what this says.
Okay. I mean, they need that permit regardless of whatever the building department has determined in term for zoning.
Well, so they need that permit, but as for that permit that connects to 240-30, whether they'd have to get that permit under 240-30, which is superseded by 342-50, that's a zoning. I know it's very confusing. I see, Kathy, I see you like, it's very confusing.
Well,
But
you know, I feel sorry for people who are watching this and trying to follow along.
I apologize if I'm being confusing. This is part of the reason that they are trying to fix this portion of the code. It's before the Board of Trustees. So what I'm trying to say here is because 342-50 is a zoning ordinance and a zoning determination has been made by the building inspector, the planning board doesn't really have the purview to say whether or not they have to go get this permit. That's the building inspector's determination.
What permit are you talking about, though? Is
240-30, that's controlled by 342-50.
We don't have an application for a wetlands permit. We have an application before us for residences in a commercial district. So I'm out right now is the residences in a commercial district. And according to section 342-50, the planning board needs to issue a special permit.
Okay, let me take a look.
Yeah, I have the code open here. The planning board may grant special permits for residence uses in the following areas. in the C1 district as a principal use in the TOD, transit-oriented development overlay district, principal use in C2 district. And this is a relatively new section of the code that was just less than a year ago changed. But the question is, in my mind, one, does the 50-foot requirement for it to be water dependent apply? For any, because, you know, I read the section of the code and I can read it in different ways, and other people jump in. It basically says a permit from the planning board shall be required for any building, structure, or parking area. So there's our nouns there. It's written in passive voice, so unfortunately it's not a clear sentence. Otherwise, so now that noun is qualified, so it's a building, structure, or parking area, otherwise requiring a subdivision or site plan approval. So we require a site plan approval here, so we're there. That is wholly or in part hereafter constructed, altered, enlarged, or enclosed. So we are dealing with a building that is going to be altered and enlarged. And then there's a qualifying phrase after that, within 50 feet of the high water line of Long Island Sound, or a body of water which flows, which is where we are by the Mamaroneck River. So does that qualifying phrase, the within 50 feet, apply to the alteration, to the whole building structure and a parking area? And that, to me, is the question. So the applicant is arguing, and Ms. Adana will certainly be vocal when we allow her to speak, after we finish this, is arguing basically that that's the way they read it. That the alteration and the construction is not within the 50 feet, even though the original building is. And I believe in reading the building inspector's memo of zoning compliance, he is basically saying the same thing. The footprint of the building, which encroaches into the 50 feet currently, is not being enlarged, or it's the non-compliance, pre-existing non-compliance is not changed in any way. Now, how does everybody else feel about that summary? I spent a lot of time thinking about this, so.
Well, I mean, we're looking at this for a site plan approval. We're not approving just the additional building that's going to be it's not going to be within 50 feet of the river. It's going to be on the existing building, which overall is within 50 feet of the river. But we're granting site plan approval for the entire building and the entire project and the entire lot. So I don't know how you can carve out the fact that, okay, fine, they're just building, improving, altering, enlarging the building part that's not in, within 50 feet of the river. It's an entire project. And I think I think the code does need to be changed, because I think my reading of this is that you can't separate what's within, a part of a building. You can't slice it up and have two different results. But I'm happy to be educated.
Richard, you're on mute. If you and anybody else have anything they want to add to the discussion? I can read it either way. Grammatical.
Hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Now we can't hear you. Lou, if you have something to add to this, now you're okay.
Hello, can you hear?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So isn't this like a regular setback that, I mean, you're not really renovating the entire building. You're renovating a piece of the building that does not fall within the 50 foot. How would this qualify as we are renovating the entire structure? I mean, the purpose of this paragraph is to say that is not to encroach on the 50 feet. And they're not. So, I mean, so even though they're renovating the building, they're not encroaching on the 50 feet. Am I reading it wrong?
There's a difference of opinion here.
Yeah,
Other people are reading it differently.
Yes.
Well-
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm Mr. Verizon. Cindy beat me to the punch. We've had this in other cases too. You can't separate out the part of a parcel that's being built upon as opposed to the part that isn't being built upon, or the part that's subject to one rule and the rest isn't. It's unitary. It's got to be the whole project. That's what the application is for 355 Phillips Park Road, and that's the entire site. So I think it does matter that it's within the river, and I have a problem with this project.
Isn't this determination, though, to be made by the building inspector? I don't know if it's a determination to be made by the planning board. Part of the building is pre-existing non-conformity, and the development is of a part that's outside of the 50-foot buffer. And I understand what everyone's saying, but it isn't jurisdictionally, isn't that to be determined by the building inspector?
Yeah, but what if he's wrong?
Oh,
If
that's
he's
his
wrong,
job.
I mean, what if he's not wrong? Why if he's reading it the right way? I mean, just because you're saying it, Richard, does not mean it makes you right. I mean, the building is not being run. I mean, the entire building is not encroaching on the 50 feet. This part of the building, this renovation is not encroaching on the 50 feet.
But it's in
Like
the same,
renovating a
it's
house.
in the same zoning lot, and it's in the same tax lot, Lou.
Okay, but it's like
If
it's
you,
like
it-
being
it's like being a little bit pregnant. You either are or you aren't.
No, this is not like being a little bit pregnant. You mean that they are not encroaching on the 50 feet, are they?
The building is, but they're not building on that, they're not adding new
Right.
units on that side.
On that side, it's an existing condition.
Well, the memo we have from the building inspector on March 30th, I think the question was just in general, is this, have they met the requirements of the zoning code? And he said yes, but I think that, and I think he's correct with that, but I don't think he goes so far in this opinion to actually opine on the requirements of the special permits.
I also think there's a lack of clarity on this new section, because if just to read it verbatim, is it says the development may not contain a building structure or parking area within 50 feet of the high water line of Long Island Sound. So that begs the question, what is the development? What is meant by the development? If the whole project, as Richard said, involves both the pre-existing part and the new part, then isn't that what the development is? Or is the development only the part that's not
The
being
develop-
so
the development-
there needs to be some clarity on that.
so I can tell you that I spoke to the building inspector today, and that's how he read it. He read it that it would have to be like a new development, a new building, a new structure, new parking area. So that's why he ultimately felt it was compliant.
The language is very clear. It talks about alterations. I mean, I think the statute envisions redevelopment of an existing building and site, and it would be silly if it didn't, because why would you want everybody to rip everything down? So, I mean, I think we're caught. I feel like we're caught here with a piecemeal revision of the zoning code that doesn't comport with other sections. I think it's a drafting error. But I think it's a problem.
So can I ask a quick question? So this site will sit there because it's non-compliant and nothing can be developed?
Well, I don't think it can get the special permit, but I think the village board is working on this, that this is in front of them. They realize there's a problem.
So under the zoning code, as opposed to the coastal management code, which is the 342-50, which is the zoning code. The special permit can only be granted if the project is water dependent. Does it have that second part of it? It can't be located anywhere else on the site?
I'm sorry, there was some background noise. What did you say?
The The, I'm trying to find,
So I think, Kathy, what you're saying is chapter 240-30 is more expansive. It
Yeah.
gives you an out. If
right,
you're not water dependent, it says, we'll let you do it if there's no place else to put it on the property. I think
Right.
that is fine, but 342-50 doesn't give you that out.
It takes away that out essentially.
Right, and it's an inconsistency in the code. It doesn't work in my mind. I don't want to come to that conclusion, but I don't see any other conclusion with the way this is written right now.
now see, again, as I said, from a grammatic standpoint, I can read the original sentence about the permit both ways. I can read that qualifying phrase at the end as qualifying only the addition or the alteration as opposed to the entire building.
Kathy, are you looking at the one in 342-50 or the one at 240-30?
Right now, I'm looking at the one at 240.
Okay, yeah, that's not a tough one for me. I get that. It's the other one.
I have 350B, let's see, 5. Development, well, as John said, the development, okay, what does that mean? May not contain a building structure, and this basically anticipates tearing everything down and building a development. The development, which is a second floor, isn't within 50 feet of the mean high water line.
Well, but it's a redevelopment of the existing building, and I think they're
I
doing
understand.
work on the
I
entire
understand.
building.
I understand all of that.
I know.
But unfortunately, neither section is written in clear language.
I don't think anybody looked at the other section when they drafted 342-50.
Well, we can't think
Cindy,
about
I don't think 340-30 anticipates a redevelopment because this building's already there, so that it can't be located elsewhere.
Right.
It's not anticipated there. So if it was being redeveloped, that would be like chopping off a piece of the building and putting it somewhere else on the site. So those two don't really relate too well. So when 342-50 was drafted, it's not clear on what's meant by development, and it's really not clear what's meant by redevelopment, and probably has to go back to the village board to give some clarity so that planning board's not sitting here trying to figure out what the law of the village is.
But in the meantime, we have an opinion from the building inspector who read development as new building or a new construction, or however he read development, and did not determine that this project was, quote, a development. That it was in addition to an existing building, and therefore it's not within the 50 feet. It's not making the structure any more non-compliant than it is now.
It's ridiculous. It's a change of use. It's a totally different building.
Well, we don't have any kind of code in our zoning code that I know of, and maybe Ms. Mason can enlighten us. If there's a change of use and that's not written in any of here, do stricter zoning laws apply?
No, it doesn't. All I can tell you is exactly how both parties are reading it. It's a bit confusing, but the way that the building inspector made the determination that it was not new development within that 50 letters. So
Does anybody on the planning board want to add anything to what we've just said? Maybe Ms. Adana would like to join the discussion and make sure that we accurately represented her opinion. So
She's raised her hand. Shall I promote her to panelist?
yes, I'm sure she's been anxiously awaiting to get in. All right, Ms. Adana, you are now a panelist. You can unmute yourself and weigh in. We do have your memo.
Good evening, Chair and members of the board. Christy, just for the record, Christy Adana. I have here with me tonight Robert Stanziel, the architect Thomas Kahani, and Earl Govan, the landscape architect. Mr. Kahani is the engineer as well as the applicant. I will move straight to the point at issue. I appreciate everything that the board is saying. What I would say with respect to 342-50 with the special permit use is that the special permit is needed for the residential use. And the provision of 34250B5 relates specifically to that residential use. And that residential use is not located within the 50-foot setback. So if that's what you're looking at, does this comply with the code requirements for the special permit for the residential use? Then as designed, it certainly does. And as it was mentioned by some of the board members, it was very intentionally and carefully designed that way, given thoughtful consideration and looking at the code to come up with something that worked for the applicant and also for the village in terms of complying with this code requirement. And the building is designed like that exactly for that reason. And so if you're looking at what the code requires, it says we need a special permit from this board for residential uses, and that will not be within 50 feet of the water, and it's not. So it seems pretty clear that if that's what you're granting the special permit for, that we comply with that requirement. And I will just also echo what's already been said about the building inspector, is that this is a zoning code issue. He does determine zoning code compliance. He was specifically asked after issuing his zoning compliance chart to look at this specific issue. And that was his determination. And that was made over 2 months ago. So we've moved forward with that. We've developed plans, renderings, we've retained consultants, we've addressed other issues, and we've appeared before this board a number of times in order to move forward with the project because of the way it was designed in order to be zoning compliant.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone on the planning board want to say anything further in response or in addition to what Ms. Donna has said? Okay. No. All right, so where do we go from here? We need to put this issue either to rest or figure out how we can put it to rest. This isn't normally something the board would vote on how we feel and whether this project, as it is presented to us, should move forward without any further zoning compliance analysis. I think I'm saying this right, but perhaps we do that. Is there any remedy, and Ms. Mason, this question is for you, is there any remedy or for either the planning board or the applicant to bring this to a higher power for interpretation other than the building inspector?
That's a good question. So village law, which is state law, does state that there's a 60-day time frame to appeal a matter to the ZBA. So Frank made his determination, I think, on March
30th.
I have March 9th that he signed the zoning determination. Is that incorrect?
He issued a subsequent memo on March 30th.
Okay, so it would depend on which you take it from, but either way, you're outside that 60-day time frame. And regarding whether that 60-day time frame would apply, it's a little bit of a complicated issue, and it would be ultimately for the ZBA to decide whether they want to hear it. But the other matter is whether the planning board could be considered an aggrieved party. So you would have to be considered aggrieved to ask the ZBA for interpretation or to question the building inspector's decision. Whether you're aggrieved or not would be a difficult argument to make. I think it would be more likely that if one of you was very concerned, you would do it on an individual basis as a resident of the village, whereas the planning board doesn't really, I mean, you have some stake in the sense that you're looking for an interpretation, but I can't really say whether or not you would be considered aggrieved. So that's something to be mindful as well.
Okay. So, is anyone in favor of taking a vote here to see if we feel that we have enough to proceed with the project? Or
I don't think we can take a vote on a process piece. If the process piece is that the building inspector made a determination and the appeal is to the ZBA, we don't agree with the ZBA, then I don't know what we're voting on, because the the process is that that's what the village determined through the proper channels. So we might be confused, but
Send it to ZBA.
if it's already, yeah, it's kind of that, we have to stay in our lane as a planning board. These questions really have to go to the ZBA.
Right. So,
Okay. Sorry.
so are we deciding to send it to the ZBA, or are we deciding to not send it to the ZBA? That's what I'm trying to get at.
And keep in mind, like I said, that if you do want to send it to the ZBA, you've got a couple issues to overcome, which one is that 60-day time frame. The second is whether the planning board can be considered an aggrieved party. So it's up to the ZBA whether they would want to hear it, but just be mindful of that, those two factors.
Well, so this is probably where at least some kind of straw poll would make sense, because I think we have serious issues being outside the time period. I don't think that we can't ask for a ZBA determination. They would be the final experts on something like this. I think frankly, some of these interlocking permits, because of defects in the code, are causing a lot of confusion, and that's where the ZBA would be very helpful. However, the applicant's correct. They have been coming in, they've established, they've made changes to the building, they've, been guided in a certain way. I'm not sure where this board stands in terms of, I think I do, but if there's a majority of the board that thinks it's okay to issue the permit, based on other factors that have to be evaluated, maybe we just move forward. Personally, I think it's I'm having trouble with this. I would be one of the votes that said, the code is confusing. I don't think it's within our power to do this. We have some legal guidance that says the same thing. But on the other hand, there's other factors to consider. But I think maybe we can solve this, because I don't think we're going to get an answer from the ZBA in any kind of reasonable amount of time.
Okay, so maybe it's not a vote, it's just a straw poll. Whether or not members of the planning board think that we could proceed with the zoning determination we have. We have other issues, obviously. We still have a site plan to review, and we still have some secret issues. So Ms. Goldstein has already told us where she stands. Mr. Littman, would you vote, or how do you feel? It's not a vote to proceed?
I would like to refer to the Zoning Board of Appeals without prejudice. I'm perfectly willing, once we get the guidance on how to interpret the rules and regulations, we can go forward reviewing this project.
Okay.
I agree with what Richard just said.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, let them make the determination. Let them make the determination. It's a new statute.
I think they're going to look like we are, because they're going to look at a building. It's an existing structure. The development does not fall within the 50 feet. They're going to ask the same question. We have an application where the building inspector has made a ruling, and we are basically denying the ruling that he made. So I think the zoning board is going to be stuck like we are, because these people followed the guidelines, and here they are again, and we don't seem to have an answer. The zoning board is not going to have an answer, guarantee you that, because there's nothing to have an answer. And the building department made a decision. The building department, the building inspector. So I vote to move forward. So that's my vote.
Okay. Even though we're at a 3-1 vote, I think I would agree with Lou. So the straw poll, the majority of the planning board would like to get a ZBA on this. Ms. Adana?
Yeah, I apologize. I really have to interject here and just raise several concerns. I already brought up the fact that we've been going through this process. It's been more than 60 days. We've attended multiple meetings since this determination was issued. And this isn't the proper procedure. If it's someone that is aggrieved and has a reason to appeal it, then it goes to the zoning board. That wasn't done here. And any ambiguity in the code by law is required, because zoning codes are in derogation of private property rights, are required to be interpreted in favor of the applicant, in favor of the property owner. So if this board is struggling with this, that is the direction that you should be leaning, is that if you're not sure, you go with the side of the applicant. And that's the law. And the building inspector has issued the determination based on the law and the code that was in front of him. And to just stop the process now, after we've gotten a traffic engineer, we've gotten a wetlands consultant. They went to the Board of Architectural Review last week and got approved. They loved the project. And we've gone through all of this steps based upon zoning compliance as it was determined months ago. And so for the board to now say, okay, well, your project is on hold, and go to the zoning board and let them make a determination, then maybe you can come back or maybe you can't. That's just really prejudicial to us. And I understand saying without prejudice, but with all due respect, there's no way to look at this without it being prejudicial. And this is an improvement. You've heard from all of our consultants, you've heard from your consultants for months that this is an improvement over existing conditions. There's no stormwater on the site. We're adding stormwater. We designed this project outside of the in order to comply with this code.
Has any member of the planning?
I think she makes a very good point. So,
Well, I understand her point that the zoning board of appeals is to appeal if the applicant is denied and wants to have it reviewed and consider variances.
yeah, but it wasn't.
What's the process for us to ask for a ruling? There is ambiguity. My point was just that the planning board shouldn't be sitting here having a legal argument. That determination has to be made by either the building inspector, legal counsel, or if anything, the ZBA, but
So
not the planning board.
I apologize, but it would have, the building inspector made its determination, and it is for then the zoning to interpret the building inspector's determination. But as I've said before, you are facing two factors, which is that you're past the 60-day time frame, and it's going to be very difficult to make the argument that the planning board is aggrieved, because what is your real stake in it? I understand you want to do your job well and you want to make sure that you're abiding by the code, but the zoning board has made the building inspector has made his determination. And so it would really be for a party like the applicant, if they felt aggrieved in some way, to appeal it.
But the building inspector is infallible and can't make a mistake, or outweighs public officials. That doesn't make any sense.
He is an employee of the village, and I mean, this is his job, but that's how the code's written. He's responsible for enforcing the zoning code, and if there's a problem with it, then it goes to the zoning board of appeals.
And for what it's worth, Mr. Cutler made the exact same interpretation in March, in his memorandum. So even though he is not officially charged with interpreting the zoning code, he was certainly an integral part of the staff and was very knowledgeable, and issued a detailed memo to the board back in March, which said the exact same thing. So it's not like it's one or the other. You have the village planner and the village building inspector saying this is okay, it does not increase the nonconformity, we can go forward, and otherwise for months.
I mean, I actually have Mr. Cutler's memo here. I don't see, just looking at it quickly, I do not see any place where he addresses the zoning code. And of course, that's not his job. He was the planner, but
I apologize to interrupt you, Ms. Goldstein.
If you can tell me where it is, I'd like to see it.
He says on the first page, under summary of the application, in the last sentence, the last two sentences, the existing building is located within the 50-foot riverine buffer from the Mamaroneck River. However, the project will not, quote, construct a building structure or parking area within the 50-foot buffer. Rather, the proposal is to build atop the existing building outside the 50-foot buffer and not increase the level of nonconformity.
So that matches what I think the acting building inspector interpreted on his March 30th memo to be a very narrow reading of, is the lot conforming? And I think that's narrow. When we're looking at granting these permits, the language is different. And so we couldn't even start this process if it wasn't zoning compliant at that point. Now we've moved on to the next step, and I just don't, I cannot reconcile these two portions of the code. So that's my struggle. But I mean, I also think it's going to be very difficult to go back to the zoning board at this point and take more time. And I don't care that it would be difficult for them. They would have to make an interpretation. That's not our job, that's their job. But I don't know how that works.
I think we're stuck with the process, though, is that in the process, if it was determined by the building inspector that it could move forward, and Mr. Cutler kind of saying the same thing, although he doesn't have the same legal authority, even if we have confusion, the process is that the determination was made as far as under the village law. So we can be confused and we can find it, but procedurally, I don't think we you know, unless Christie says we can be an aggrieved party, our confusion doesn't fit within the process.
Well,
Someone else made that
So
determination.
John, are you changing your straw poll?
Well, I am because of the process. You know, if it could be, I'm saying that it's not for us to argue here, even though our confusion. But if we don't have an ability to have this go to the zoning board of appeal for their determination, that determination's already been made under the process. We can't interrupt that process if that's the law as it's written in this village.
But the law in 342-50 specifically takes away our discretion to issue a permit. It says you, planning board, may not grant a permit. And I don't think anybody looked at 240-30 is my suspicion. Everybody kind of forgot about that. They rushed in to look at the TOD permit to put residential in a commercial area. I don't think that 240-30 was ever a part of the conversation. And I think it was overlooked, but I think that's what we have to deal with now. But it's not like, can we do it or not do it? It says we can't. So.
All right, let's
That's my-
try to
that's
wrap
my
it. Let's try to
problem.
wrap this up. Because we've been talking about this for quite some time now, and now we're sort of circling back.
Yep.
Okay. So we took a straw poll and it was 3 people to refer this to ZBA and 2 not to move forward. And
Oh, actually, Kathy, when I said my piece, what I mean by moving forward is to get the application moved forward. I think you took my, I mean, because we are now overruling what the building inspector said. And I could see if the building inspector had said no, and then he would go to the zoning board. But this is an existing condition that it will never be fixed.
Okay. You know what? I just thought of something. What if we move forward looking at this application, but we go back to the building inspector and say, would you please look at these 2 sections of the code and write a memo to us that tells us that you've looked at this and this is your interpretation. Elaborate more on what he gave us on March 30th, which I think was very bare bones about, is this a conforming property or not? Give us that information, because then we'll have something in the file that we can rely on.
Right. So that's like putting a big sign over his head.
I'm sorry, what?
that's why he makes the big bucks.
I would even invite him to the meeting to explain his memo.
Well, I want something in writing for the record, and
Oh, yes.
however you handle it, that's fine. But if we're surmising that he evaluated all of these code sections in his decision, I just want a more robust memorandum from him stating that, because I'm assuming he did. It shouldn't be a big deal.
And I just think that if you are going to go down this path, you need to be very mindful of questioning determination, if that makes sense, because it's really not what's the planning board's purview to question it. I think it's fair to ask for some clarification and some substance, but I just want to be mindful that we aren't going to be questioning his determination as correct.
I think I posted in a way that I'm looking for clarification and a more robust and filled out memorandum from him that explains. Just come out and say it. I mean, we're surmising that's what he said and that's what he analyzed. So I'm not thinking it should be a big problem.
Well, it will be a big problem because you're now putting the building inspector in a position of having to explain himself and in a position of a defense mode. And, so it's also not, this is not being fair to the applicant neither, because now basically you got 10 eyes looking at this guy and he's gonna make sure that, so you're putting undue stress on a decision. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but.
I think we've had some really good input from board members on this issue. We have now a new proposal on the table, not to send it to ZBA, but to just ask the building inspector to clarify for the record whether he thoroughly looked at not only 34250, but 24030. Is that correct?
And to explain the zoning to us.
Well, he doesn't necessarily need to give us a course on zoning. He basically makes a determination that it's zoning compliant.
Trying to fish out the rationale behind the decision.
I mean, if he thoroughly looked at 240 and felt everything was fine, then he should just tell us that.
Yeah.
And again,
Personally, I would move forward with what we have now, but let's take a straw poll again. Does anybody want to, we have a proposal to send it back to the building inspector for just more clarification. So Cindy?
Yeah, that's my proposal, and keep moving forward. I don't see a reason not to. Everybody's expecting he'll just add a few sentences to his determination, write a new memo and give it to us, because I'm very uncomfortable voting to issue a permit on something that in my mind is still unclear. I need to rely on his expertise, and I need him to express that to us so it's in the record.
So my opinion is I move to approve the application with a memo to file from the building inspector. Is that the same thing?
you're not
Not-
approving.
Not approving any permit at this point. It's too premature. We're just determining whether the project should be moving forward. That's all. So we're saying now we move the project forward, we go into the next steps, and the building inspector just clarify his determination. We've lost Lou's video.
Sorry, I'm
John,
back.
Back.
So,
okay, John, why don't you,
so if we send it to the building inspector and he says that, yes, I reviewed 24030 and it's consistent with my interpretation of 34250, then we move forward and consider the rest of the application and the rest of the pieces. If he says no, then certainly the applicant's got something to say about the process we followed here. So, if he says yes, I think we're fine. If he says no, then we have some legal problems.
And then we'll ask our attorney for help.
This one, Christie.
Wonderful.
Sorry, Christy.
No, it's okay. I just want to make one point, because I did speak to Frank today, and for what it's worth, the way that and I know I've already said this, I just want to say it one more time since Frank is not here. But again, how he read it is that it would be new development within that 50 feet. So it would be if they were building over where that 50-foot buffer is. And so he's not reading construct, alter, enlarge, enclose. He's reading it as if you were putting a new building over that area. So I just wanted to say that just to clarify. I don't know if it's going to be of help to anyone, because I think you already have his memos and you already understand. But since he's not here, I just felt obligated to say it.
okay. So Don, are you saying that you are in agreement with just asking the building inspector just to clarify his determination?
I don't know if it's going to change what he said. I think Chrissy just said that he's considering it, whether it's new development in the 50-foot area.
Right.
So I think he's already made
That's
that
what
determination.
250. That's what 34250 says. Development.
Yeah.
Right.
That's it. Right. So,
Right.
So there
I
shouldn't be
think
a problem.
we're stuck with his memo.
Richard, do you, how do you feel on this? It's
I agree with
step forward and it's 2 steps backwards now.
Yeah. I agree with Cindy. I look towards speaking with the building inspector, either by memo or live, as a positive step, not a criticism. Just elucidate what the background is so we can make a good decision. That's all. I don't have any problem with it. And
Yeah,
neither
but
should
if
he.
he makes, but I know how this is gonna play out. Whatever decision that he makes that it's positive, we will find a way of sending it back with a bunch of comments, and we're never gonna get out of it.
I don't think that's in our lane to send anything back with a bunch of comments. I mean,
This is what we're doing right now. We're
Because
questioning
there's-
the building inspector.
you know, there's lousy language and there's 2 different sections, and he clarifies that he's the chief zoning officer. You know, as far as I'm concerned, you know, we move forward. We've got other issues with this application. Yeah, I summarize this by saying the majority of the planning board wants to send this to and ask the building inspector to join us at our next meeting and just clarify everything, for at least join us for a short time.
Yeah,
Why
fine.
can't he send us a
That's
memo?
fine.
Why can't he send us a memo? This,
I'm fine with that.
Ms. Adana, we have some issues about the velocity report, so you're not going to lose any time because of this, okay? I know you've been going to HCZM. You're kind of at a standstill because we haven't made a secret determination yet.
Yes.
So this is a good segue into the second part of the discussion with regards to 355 Phillips Park Road. Determination. Again, we typed it as an unlisted. We did not make a secret determination. Was referenced, I guess, at some point to a report that recommended a phase 2 environmental review. This planning board did not have copies of that report in our files for our record. I think it went to HCZM and it was never shared with us until after the last meeting. So now we have that, and one of our planning consultant, Ms. Lai's first actions was to recommend that we ask our village manager for a engineer to review that report and advise us on whether we can make a determination or whether the phase 2 should move forward. Now, I know that request was made of the village manager because I made it. He responded to me and said he was going to follow up on it, and I haven't heard any other word. I don't know if anyone on this panel, any of the staff, heard of anything happening with that. That's where I know it stands. So, did anybody get a request to review this? Ryan? No?
I didn't get a request to review it, but I did speak with our in-house hazmat staff just briefly on it. And the phase 1 report does identify 2 potential recognized environmental conditions on the property and does recommend that a phase 2 investigation be prepared. And since this project is going to involve residential units and it's not going to be a gas station or something like that, I think it would be important for the board to request that a phase 2 be prepared prior to a secret determination so that any environmental conditions can be mitigated as part of the project. Because ultimately, I think this project does not rise to the scale of needing a POSDEC. I think it's headed in the neg deck direction, but I think that the board should have the phase 2 on file to make that determination.
And please.
Hold on a second. Ms. Adana, are you want to weigh in here?
Yes, I would like to, Chair. Thank you. If I could just speak the reason for the need of the phase 2, there isn't actually anything on the site that's requiring the phase 2, right? The phase 2 is based upon prior uses, but there is nothing that was found to indicate that there's any reason to believe there would be any such contamination. It's being recommended for caution reasons, and it will be done as part of the development. And I mean, look back at the other project with 172 East Prospect, we had underground storage tanks, and those didn't come out until after the project was approved and the building was demolished. And then the testing was done, and it was provided to the village, and all of the approvals were conditioned upon if there was any contamination, it would have to be remediated. I really don't see a reason for deviating from that and requiring the applicant to undergo this study. I mean, are we going to have to remove the above ground storage tanks too? They're in great shape. Not great, but the report says there's no indication of any leakage coming out of those tanks. This is another step in the construction process, and to hold up any sort of determination based upon doing all of that when that has not been required for other projects, it doesn't really make sense to me, with all due respect.
Have any comments on this? I
don't think, but I don't think we are asking for you to perform any actual work. I think what we are asking is for you to take a few samples and see what we're dealing with. And then the remediation would be done when the work will be, when the work is being built, when a building is being built. So is that something that you agree? I mean, we're not asking you to go spend the money if we don't even know.
We have done this. We have done this before. We did this with a project on Library Lane. And we did this with other projects as well, where we asked for just some soil borings and get our.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Take a few samples, see what's there, and then you remediate it when you're doing the work.
So that's the understanding of the board. I just want to make sure I'm clear that's the scope of what's being asked of us at this point, is just saying.
I'm gonna rely on our planning consultant. Is that what you, Ashley, is that what you were thinking?
I would recommend that a phase 2 be prepared. The remediation wouldn't necessarily be done until the project was approved and under construction. So the phase 2 would identify the contaminants and could outline the method of remediation that would be done in the future.
I agree.
Okay.
That's very fair.
Sounds good to me.
Me too.
Okay.
Works.
There is a question from the public.
This is it somebody who's on the project team?
Yes, Dominic Brescia has their hand raised.
That's the applicant. Okay.
Shall I unmute them?
Ms. Adana, are you speaking for the applicant?
I think he's more familiar with the process, and if he wants to.
Okay.
This,
All right.
certainly.
You can promote Mr. Brescia and unmute him.
Okay, he's been promoted.
Okay, Mr. Brescia, you can unmute yourself. And if you want to weigh in here before.
Hi, good evening. How are you?
Evening.
Okay, so I just want to be, typically the way we do the phase 2 is when they do the resolutions, it's part of the resolutions, terms and conditions, that we absolutely make sure that any phase 2 requirements are adhered to. Everything goes to the building department for their review and approval as far as any remediation or removal and tickets and so on and so forth. That's typically the way it's done. So I would respectfully ask that we just repeat the same process and doing the same. And the contingency is no building permit will be issued as part of the terms and conditions and the resolution until they get all DEC clearances, building department clearances, so on and so forth. That's how we've done it in the last 2 projects, and it worked pretty well. And that's why I'm chiming in on this particular one, because I'm hopeful to, move forward and get the secret so we can get back to the AZZM to see what their concerns are, and we can do everything, under one umbrella. But, that's what I'm pretty much reiterating.
Okay. Before the applicant weighed in, it looked like we had pretty much unanimous agreement with the proposal to ask the applicant to do some borings and have a sense of what was there and how it would be remediated before we made a secret determination. Has anybody's mind changed?
Well, what's there? okay, what's there, it's not going to change the secret application. I mean, what's there can always be remediated. I think the problem here is that do the phase two, and that will basically, what if the phase two is, there's contaminants? And so, but the outcome will always be take care of it when you do the construction. Before you do the building, once you start the construction, you remediate it. I mean, are you afraid, are you afraid that the findings will stop you from getting a negative seeker?
I think we're just trying to keep the process moving along, and under the current circumstances, it's unclear how long something like that would take. And so it's given that the process has worked differently in the past and it is an issue.
No. I mean, I don't have a problem if you as long as you can get it's taken care of before you get issue a building permit. So what is the difference between what we're asking and what you're proposing? What is the difference here?
Well, it's really just holding off, I believe, on doing that until we've gotten all of the approvals and are ready to move forward with getting the permits, as opposed to.
So this is a financial issue for you?
It's more of a timing issue, in how long it would take to do this process. And frankly, I'm not really sure what that is. Dominic, I don't know if you know how long something like that would take.
I'm not having a problem with holding off, and I don't know what was done with Mr. Bresh's projects in the past, but a couple of projects that I've worked on in the 2.5 years that I've been on the planning board, we had soil samples taken beforehand.
Okay.
What you're saying basically is that we just bypass the whole environmental process that is required by law, and that's sort of put that off till later. We give it a neg deck without all the information that we might need. And you'll take care of it later. And I have a problem. With that.
Okay.
That wasn't what I was trying to suggest, Chair, and I apologize if it came across that way. That's
kind of did. Oh no,
because we certainly have every intention of addressing it, and we went through this whole detailed outline in the letter. If we were trying to hide something or skirt something under the rug, this wasn't the way to do it.
I don't feel like you're trying to hide anything.
That's not what we're saying.
I just feel like we have a process in place. If it's not been applied uniformly, I can't change the past. I can only deal with the present and possibly the future. And I feel that if we need to make a secret determination before HCZM can finish their work and determine consistency, and we feel we need this information to make a secret determination, then we shouldn't wait until after all the approvals are gotten to find out about the environmental conditions. That's all I'm saying.
Understood.
No, and I think it's always better not to have a lot of conditions, because someone has to read the conditions in the resolution and make sure this is just such a cleaner way to go. And I actually think it'll move things along quicker with HCZMC. Let's just get it all out there and keep going.
Okay.
So does the rest of the board agree that that's?
So basically,
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that process.
Okay.
If we're gonna neg deck it, then we should have information before we neg deck it.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
I agree with what you laid out.
Oh, this fucking thing. Well,
Okay, we finished with 355 Phillips Park Road for tonight.
I'm sorry, before we finish, could I just ask, were there any other remaining issues that the board had identified that we should be looking at or addressing, or is it really
Nothing that didn't get mentioned last time. You said you were going to look at some of the recommendations from the county planning department. That was one of them. Let's see, where's my notes? We looked at the traffic, the landscape and the roofing and the roof garden. And we do have a memo from Susan Oakley, but since that's really not pertinent tonight, we've spent a lot of time on this, we can move forward. But yeah, that was basically it.
Okay, thank you very much.
There was a reference about a drain in a trash room and where it's going to go. And we don't need to weigh on that, but it can't drain into the waterway. It has to go into the sanitary sewer. Illegal hookup if you drain it directly into the waterway. It's not legal. Okay. All right, now just, I guess because this is an open public hearing, still, we have, if there's anyone who would like to speak on this particular project and the discussions that we just had at this point in time, and only really on this project, because that's the legal process that we're in right now, a public hearing on the special permit. If anybody wants to speak, please raise your hand so that Ms. Lai can promote you and allow you to speak.
Looks like there might be one person on the phone, and you can press *9 to raise your hand. I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. All right, let's move on. It's the same group of people here. So, and we're adding Susan Oakley then to our discussion. We are now going to address the landscape plan 620 Boston Post Road. So West Boston Post Road, which is also a project, and the team. Okay, let's kind of get caught up to where we were here last. You guys were here, I don't remember when, a while back, in March 12th. There was a landscape for 620 West Boston Post Road. I think we established, everybody's in agreement that the landscape that was installed was not in accordance with the plan for whatever reason. The applicant was given two choices by the staff, either take out what you put in and follow the plan, or pay the money to the village and the village will take out what you put on and follow the plan. The applicant at that point in time chose to propose a third option, which is a different plan. This board rejected that plan and basically asked the applicant to work with our landscape consultant, Susan Oakley, to reconcile the two and get back to what the planning board approved. So for us, fourth option, a different plan. And we have comments from our landscape architect. I hope everybody's reviewed it. I don't know, Ms. Adana, does the applicant want to make a presentation to us with regards to what we are now having before us as a yet a different proposal?
Yes, I am here, Christy Adana, for the record, on behalf of the applicant. I would ask if Dominic Brescia and Earl Govan could be promoted to panelists, since Earl is the landscape architect, and I think they would be able to be more productive in the dialogue that's occurring tonight. Thank you.
They have both been promoted.
Okay. All right, you may unmute yourself and proceed, whoever is going to do the presentation on this yet another different plan that's not the same as what was approved. So, Mr. Govan, is that?
That's correct.
Hi. Okay.
Okay, can you hear me? Everybody can hear me okay?
I believe so, yep.
So, in trying to work with the existing material, I was not so aware of the history. This being the fourth plan. So we were asked to come up with a plan that would keep some of the larger material and adapt a new plan to make it look more like the rendering that was originally proposed. So
proposed and approved.
That's correct.
Proposed and approved. Right.
Yes. So I'm going to start at the beginning with the white pines in the back. I agree with Susan. They're not the ideal plant material for the area. They do get large. The owner has agreed to potentially propose a maintenance bond in order to keep those at a size that is manageable. They aren't ideal material for that area, but they will provide a screen for both the new building or the new residents and the existing neighbors. We would like to do a similar agreement, but maybe before we go beyond that, we should discuss that and whether or not that's even an option at this point in time.
We do have a different opinion from our landscape consultant. Susan, would you like to address pruning white pines and why you don't think it's a good idea?
I'm sure everyone has seen the memo, and I included some photographs because, as we all know, pictures are worth 1,000 words. To begin with, already they are very, they're not thick trees. They're very sparse. So to do any pruning, which is not recommended, would create, in my opinion, an eyesore. Sometimes with trees, when you prune them, they will regrow on the branches that remain. That's not true of white pines. If you prune them back or prune the top, they will not generate new growth. So my recommendation is to go back to the originally approved green giant arborvitaes to create a thick, substantial screen that will benefit not only the neighbors on the other side from screening the new building, but also the new residents to the 620 West Boston Post Road.
I can attest to some experience with white pines. What you get is just, it gets chopped at the top and it just keeps growing tall with no top. It doesn't fill in like a hedge.
Exactly.
Mr. Govin, can you explain why you said they couldn't be replanted somewhere else?
I didn't. Well, they're a little large for the area. I'm just not sure they're going to be able to get them out of there. So I believe if they come out, they'll have to be cut down.
Okay, but we can try to take them out and replant them elsewhere.
I don't know if you can get them a large enough machine in there to remove them.
At this point,
So I think that's ultimately why we've been trying so hard to save them. The owner is concerned that now he's going to have to go down and cut them down. Obviously, the green giant is a better choice. The white pine is not something we plant very much of these days.
And I don't like the idea of a maintenance bond because this would have to be maintained in perpetuity until plants die or somebody cuts them down. And what is somebody going to go check this constantly and make sure this is being done? This is just not, the whole concept of a maintenance bond for something like this just doesn't, to me, it doesn't seem practical. I don't know how anybody else feels about this, but we'll do this issue by issue. I think this is a good way to do it. Any members of the planning board have anything to say about the proposed managing white pines as a hedge?
I mean, I think based on Ms. Oakley's recommendation, that it's just the wrong material. I mean, I don't want to see them cut down, but I don't see another answer because you're right. To have a maintenance bond going on in perpetuity is ridiculous. And it's not going, pruning is not going to work.
It won't work. Anybody else have any opinion, or we'll just move on? I don't think that keeping the white pines there is why. Okay. The second one.
So item 2 is the green giants along the, we'll call it the north. I'm not quite sure if that's actually north, but across the gas station. We would like to keep those as a hedge. We feel that they can be easily maintained in that area. It's a small area, but the green giants do take to pruning. And we would like to create a hedge between the two uses. So that's the ultimate reason for the green giants being there. We were proposing that they are to remain and to be maintained as a hedge.
Ms. Oakley, I think.
I would agree with Mr. Govin that they are much better suited to pruning. Since we're all here, I did have a question about the size they propose to prune them. that's 8 to 10 feet wide and 20 feet tall. Given that that area on that side of the new structure is 8 to 10 feet wide, how do they propose keeping them at this size? How do they propose getting in machinery or people to not only prune it 8 to 10 feet wide when it's already on the property line, but keeping it at 20 feet tall? Will there be cherry pickers? I mean, what's the plan for that?
Well, if the tree is 8 feet wide and it's pretty close to the property line, there should be 4 to 5 feet on one side. So there should be enough room between the building and the 4 to 5 foot wide green giant, due to the fact that the 8 feet is both sides of the trunk. So half of that is on the other side. So they're not going to grow 8 feet towards the building. They're only going to grow 4 feet towards the building, or 5 feet, and be maintained. So with, a 18-foot ladder, 16-foot ladder, planks, there are ways to maintain, as long as we can keep that distance between the building, and that would be the intent, is to keep enough room between the buildings so that they can be maintained to a reasonable height.
Okay.
When we were here in March, one of the neighbors cited, and I don't know if it was these plantings that impeded the sight line of traffic coming. It wasn't these, it was the other, on the other side.
It was the southwest corner where there were planted unapproved other additional white pines.
Okay. So
I'm gonna say, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. I was just gonna move on to the next item. Is everybody comfortable with the arborvitae staying? And I mean, how would we make sure that these things are pruned and everything is done? I mean, I guess it's up to people complaining to us, like the owners of the gas station, that this has gotten too big, or everybody in the village drives past this piece of property. It is one of the most visible pieces of property in the community, which is one of the reasons why we're so concerned about the aesthetics of the landscaping. So I guess if people realize that things are starting to look a little shaggy, like all of our hair, they'll complain. Who they'll complain to probably will be the planning board, because we let this go. So I have a little problem with relying on people to maintain things that are supposed to be different than the way they are actually genetically disposed to do. But we'll let that go for now.
I would assume that the maintenance would be as a benefit to the property owner as well. They don't want the trees growing into the building, so it's only going to benefit them to keep them back away from the building.
Okay, all right. Next item is maintenance bond for that as well. And again, I don't know how that's going to work. It's something to consider. Okay, number 4, Mr. Govind, do you want to?
Sure. So that was the 4 white pines that were planted adjacent to the other residential use to the other side of the property. We are recommending we are proposing to remove those and to put in some large shrubs, which grow to be 5, 6, 7, 8 feet, to fill up that area and to create a separation between the two properties, but with large shrubs instead of white pines. They are attractive shrubs, blooming at different times of the year. Again, they're meant to fill in to create a mass of again, large shrubs defining the two properties.
And Susan, your comments on this?
I felt that they were that they would work fine in that space. They do get to be quite large. I just question whether those will also be overly pruned. I as a rule, am against pruning to maintain the size of something in a space where something more appropriately sized could have been planted in the first place, and it reduces the need for annual pruning. You just let the plant grow to its mature size and it's more appropriate for the space. So
we are not planning on pruning those.
You know,
They're planted tight so that the three shrubs essentially grow into one and create one large mass. So they're planted tighter than their spacing could be, but the idea is to create a mass between the three of them and creating one large mass. So that's the concept behind that.
And what was there on the original plan that was approved?
Hold on a second.
why didn't you?
I mean, I think maybe there wasn't much of anything, but
Oh, there was something. I think that the last memo that Susan gave us, she gave us what was approved and what was installed. But it doesn't have,
yeah, I didn't see it.
Goes back.
yeah, it doesn't have the location. Let's see. Right side southwest, the section was not approved for plan with white pine, okay. Have to pull out the plan. Not that clear. All right.
All right, I don't mean to belabor that. I was just wondering
Yeah.
what the original approved plant material was. Maybe we just go back to that, but it's okay.
I don't have it in front of me. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess the most important thing here is that it doesn't grow too tall and too large to one block the sight view of the cars coming who are wanting to turn, coming down Rockland, who are wanting to turn onto the post road, and two, the people who live in that building who are basically right now enjoying somewhat of a view, probably somewhat limited, but a view of Harbor Island and a view of the water, and the white pines were going to totally block that. They weren't approved in the first place.
If they're on the first floor, they will block the view.
And were the plans that were approved, would they block the view of anyone?
There was nothing, if I recall correctly, there was nothing that close to the sidewalk on the approved plan. It was open.
Okay, so we're gonna hold that open as a question. Mr. Goldman, maybe you could go back to the approved plan and see what was placed there, because that is of a concern to us.
Yeah, I'm looking for it. I can't seem to put my finger on it.
Okay. That's okay. You're gonna have to work on the white pines anyway. Okay, number 5, relocating and transplanting much of the existing material into coherent massings and adding new plantings. You want to explain that to us?
We have added plants to supplement the existing. We've added additional plants such as Liriope, Echinacea, Miscanthus, to try to give more of that beachy look that was on the rendering that was suggested that we kind of get back closer to. So we have ornamental grasses, perennials. We're relocating the junipers, adding ornamental grasses and adding perennials to supplement what's there, and moving much of what's there now to create more cohesive massings.
I believe there was nothing along that south property line that was proposed. I stand corrected, but I mean,
Nothing that
I'm
would
not
grow
sure about, pardon me?
tall. Nothing that would grow tall or
No, there was nothing
yeah.
along that property line proposed.
And I think there's like a utility or electrical box there or something, so it would be good to plant something in that region, right?
That's against the building.
Oh, okay.
Utilities.
But
It's
the
not-
actual property line, it says existing tree to remain. There's trees there exactly on the property line, but in the corner out towards the road, I don't see anything on.
There was nothing new, right? junipers along the sidewalk, but they were low
Right.
creeping.
So, okay, so there's a deviation, that might not be a good deviation. Susan, as far as the additional plantings and relocating and the cohesiveness of the new plantings, your comments were that it would be an improvement over what was done?
Yes, conceptually, transplanting to create masses of plants is a good concept. It creates more of a peaceful landscape rather than a lot of everything a bit staccato. So massing, I would wholeheartedly agree with, especially in such a small space.
Okay.
But if as we proceed, you'll see how it's premature to discuss that right now.
Okay. We'll take your word on that one. You're the expert. All right, number 7, Mr. Govan, the walkway that was included in the original plan.
We've added the walkway back in.
Okay. Okay, and that,
On the plan, not as built. It's on the plan. It's on the plan.
We have proposed to add it back in.
okay, and it will match the material that the existing walkways?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. Number 8.
Number 8 is the planters. I believe the design was on the plan. Below the site plan, where we show what's in each planter in a typical fashion.
Oh,
There's 2 ilex in the small planters,
Oh,
3
yes.
ilex in the larger planter, and tardiva hydrangea with nepeta, and I think liriope in the larger planter.
Susan, you see that? It's at the very bottom of the page towards the right, right to the left of the shrub planting detail.
I see that now. Thank you. That was sort of hidden away there.
All right. We'll give you time after this to look at this, because I think number 9.
So as you can see from Susan's pictures, there's a lot more boulders than what we're showing.
We don't have to look at the pictures. We all
Okay.
ask them all the time.
If you look at the picture versus our plan, we're suggesting that 2 or 3 boulders on each side remain, the larger boulders.
Right.
So that was what we're proposing.
And tell me why. I mean,
They're very large.
and that's all the reason, because they're too.
They came from the site. They're very large. And I think with the new planting, we can work around them and make them part of the landscape.
Because right now they're totally out of proportion to the building.
They're a bit out of scale.
They're very out of scale.
And there's too many of them.
And there's too many of them, and they're just an eyesore. And I think that was one of the issues that most people driving past have with the building. It's being known as the building with the boulders. And that's not the way I think that anybody wants this building to be known. So, okay. How do people feel about leaving some of the boulders there? None of them were on the original plan, and we're taking out the small ones and leaving the big ones. So
I would like to remove all the boulders. That's my suggestion. They don't add anything aesthetically.
And Susan, I think you also suggested that all unapproved boulders be removed from the front. Is
That's my recommendation.
your recommendation to us?
I agree with Richard's assessment.
Anybody have any other comments to make about this, about boulders?
I agree. They weren't on the plan. I don't think they add anything. No, they should go.
I also agree. They just don't belong there. Maybe you can make them work and you can soften them a little bit, but at this point in time, it's hard for us to envision that. We don't have any renderings. We don't have any, we're just looking at what exists now. And
If I may, Kathy, I have a more basic question. Why wasn't this built to what we approved on the plan?
We went through this last time. The last meeting, we had that discussion.
Was I there? I don't remember.
It wasn't clear. Mr. Brescia, his first statement was that he mistakenly used an earlier plan that wasn't approved. But then later on in the discussion, he said he added some things and changed some things on purpose. So we didn't get a clear answer. It might have been some combination of those two things, but it really doesn't matter at this point in time. It is what it is, and we have.
Well, I think as a general principle, new projects should conform to their plan. And on the aesthetics, please get rid of the rocks.
I think that goes without saying. That's why we're all here, because this is approved, and right now there's no certificate of occupancy being given for this building because of it. And so we're going to continue. Let's see. Susan, do you have anything else to say about the front of the building besides that?
Well, this probably should have been discussed first, but it's very difficult to assess a landscape plan when it doesn't reflect the conditions, especially an attempt to amend the plan. I don't know if anyone's been there up close and viewed these two areas on either side of the garage entrance, but there are many grates, manholes, drains that have never appeared on any plan that I've seen. And so therefore, even looking at this newly submitted plan, it's in a vacuum because the grates, manholes, and drains aren't shown on the plan. So
we did request at our last meeting that the landscape plan reflect the conditions of the items that are now there, and the plants be shown in relationship to the many things that are now in the front that are part of the infrastructure of the building. So that is missing from what we're looking at.
So it's hard for me
to. Right.
That's why I spoke conceptually about the massing and the additional plantings as a concept. That's a great idea, but you can't really look critique the plan because it doesn't show everything that's there.
Not complete. Okay.
Susan, with the discussion about the removal of the boulders and then the infrastructure that's there, and then Mr. Govan said something about having seagrasses that are more reminiscent of what I believe we passed and should be there. Will those seagrasses grow in to cover that infrastructure?
I don't know. I have to see the grasses in comparison to where the infrastructure is.
Right.
So the material would not grow over the structures that are on the surface, but they would grow around. The idea is to hide them.
Right, but we would need to see that accurately depicted so that we can make some judgment about how well it covers it and what the public will see in this very visual site.
Okie doke.
Okay. The last item of concern was the rear plant bed, the rear of the property. And again, what was done did not, the plan does not reflect the as built. There's more boulders in the back. And so what was done was not what was approved. Susan, do you want to add anything to that? And
I was just taking this plan, newly submitted plan, comparing that to the as-built conditions. I think we're way past the point of the originally approved plan. But I just wanted to point out to the board that what was depicted, again, in the rear, what was depicted is not what is reflected
it's actually there
on the site. Exactly.
Right. Okay. Now the boulders in the back are obviously not as obvious to the general public, and the people in the village of Mamaroneck, just to the people who live there.
Right.
But again, it's not what was approved. And it's hard to judge because all that's on the plan we have now is existing planting to remain. And we're not really sure exactly what that is. It looks like the way it's drawn that it basically fills up the entire back so that the actual piece of property back there is not accessible to the residents, that it's completely planted. And with the arborvitae along the side, there won't be access on the side to get down there. I don't know if you can get down from the deck.
Just to clarify for those of you who haven't seen it or recently, it's basically terraced. The pines you can see are at the highest level. Then the boulders, and that's shown in the picture, are basically at waist level. And then there's a patio below that.
Okay. So there is a patio there.
The deck.
In
They're
your
calling it on the landscape plan.
Does it really? It's yeah, I guess that's what that is in the
So
plan.
you're looking in this picture, you're looking at the first waist-high terrace if you're standing on the deck.
Right. And what we're looking at basically is rocks as opposed to plants.
And a few sparse plant, mostly mulch. The whole area is mostly mulch with a few random plants thrown in. There's no.
So we have to. I think that, and from my opinion, I would ask Mr. Govan to go back to the approved plan to see what was supposed to be done back there. This doesn't look like what was. I can't imagine this being approved unless these plants are going to really fill in. And the rocks weren't, obviously the boulders were not approved. They were just left there because it was convenient for the builder to leave the boulders and not pull them away. That's what it sounds like.
So I'm just going to add that this is, the fourth plan is I plan. We weren't contracted to look at the back, but I didn't have anything to do with the planting of that. I didn't have anything to do with the planning of that. So we were trying to address the issues that were brought up from Susan's earlier letter. So, some of these things were addressed, obviously some weren't, but we were addressing issues that were brought up previously.
Okay.
I can't really answer why things were done or weren't done or what was planted in lieu of others. All I was trying to do is remediate or mitigate a situation that seems to be going bad. So that was my goal.
I think the overarching concept here was that the approved plan was not followed. The specifics of how it was not followed, I guess, they vary from space to space, but I think we were all looking for, because we had visuals and we had lovely renderings of what it was going to look like after it was built out. And then we had what it actually looked like. And we were looking more for the entire property to be looking more like what was approved by a previous planning board. Some
Chair,
sitting here, but not all members.
sorry, there's a member of the public that has their hand raised if you'd like to allow public comment.
We did allow public comment last on this. Does anybody have anything they want to say before we allow the public to speak? Okay. You want to?
He's unmuted.
Good evening, Stuart Tickert.
Oh.
I followed this project for a long time. And there are certainly huge issues with the landscaping, but there are also other major issues that affect the landscaping. I just like to say that at the beginning of minutes of the last meeting, if Mr. Precious says he followed the plans, I'm not sure how that statement is made. Further on, he says we used arborvitae to screen the utilities that are against the building to the left of the entrance. Those utilities were never planned to be there. Those utilities were planned to be on the east side of the building. One shrub would have screened those suckers. I think the green giants up the side are just a disaster. They're fast growing trees. They want to grow to 50 feet tall. There's very little fire access on this site. There may well be, firemen may need to get up the sides of the building to get to the back of the building. depending on how the fire takes place. I'm not sure what you decided on the walk, but the plan seemed to just add a walk that goes out to the post road as originally planned. I would suggest to increase landscaping area, the walk that was put in without approval be removed so it can be landscaped. Greg Cutler asked for stormwater changes to be shown and submitted with the plan, so I'm not sure. I'm truly not sure why the board accepted this without that coming back, since it is such a crucial part.
Keith, we didn't accept this. We're just having a discussion.
No, I just want to bring these things up because I think this may play out over a long period of time. I would like board to be aware that there are issues with the height of the buildings. And certainly, I'm not sure green giants are proper on the back line. I think they'll probably grow up to block the view of the neighbors. And during planning review of this, there were long periods of time spent reducing this building by 6 inches and a foot. I believe at the end, they took a foot off the basement height. The developer added that back on when he poured the foundation. That's documented by the building inspector at the time, who said that the applicant would be required to make up that foot in the framing of the next floors. Not sure if that's done. I don't think this building conforms with multiple dwellings law. It's an interior lot, and I believe that requires a 30-foot backyard. I don't think either side of this lot in the back is 30 feet. And I think there's a significant problem with lot coverage. I believe the initial review only counted the buildings and not the connecting infrastructure between them. So I would urge this board to not do a kind of Chinese menu on the landscape plan. I would agree with the members who have said, why wasn't this built the way it was approved originally? I remember the last meeting when they brought the final plan to the board that showed a gambrel style roof, I think that's what you call it, on the ends, and everybody was knocked out by how nice it was. And we've gotten what you see there, which is very, very different. So those would be my comments. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody from the planning board want to make any comments at all with regards to what we have in front of us and how we want to proceed? We did it kind of piecemeal, but let's just sort of wrap this up and summarize where we are.
Well, clearly we need a new plan.
I guess, Mr. Govan, I think that you were sort of brought in and given a scope of work by your client that didn't totally reflect the issues that existed with the planning board and with the village of Mamaroneck, who we represent. I think you have a better sense of the history here and where we feel. I don't get a sense from my fellow members that there's anybody here that's willing to accept this plan the way it stands right now. Susan is our consultant, and we take her advice seriously. And so we had asked Mr. Brescher to work with Susan and to come up with a plan that Susan felt would be acceptable to us and therefore the residents of the village. And so I don't know what else to say except to do that, which is what we asked 3 months ago.
Understood.
Is it fair to give Mr. Govan a little more guidance and say, find that approved plan and conform to that to the best of your ability and start, let's just go back to square one, although we do have, as Susan pointed out, all of these grates, manholes, and things like that to work around that were not part of the original plan. I know we can't I'm one of the ones who was very frustrated that this building was not built according to the approved plans by the planning board and HCZMC. But we can change the landscaping, we can't change the building. And to move this along, you know, it's taking a lot of time, and I am concerned that whatever plan we come up with, that the applicant still isn't going to do this the way it will be approved. So I have reservations about the process, you know, after it leaves our hands, because we've had a bad track record here.
And I think that's one of the reasons why posting maintenance bonds is maybe not an option here, because there were issues with the way the building was built, there were issues with the way the landscaping was done. So we just, regardless of how we got here, here's where we are, and you all can't move forward because you're not getting your C of O until we have improved landscaping, a plan, and it being implemented the way it's approved. Anybody have a difference of opinion here?
I think it's good for Mr. Govan to refer to the previous landscape plans and the history behind them. But because the infrastructure in the front of the property has never been documented, because the utilities have been moved to places that they weren't, I don't know the approval process of the utilities being moved, but they are not where they were when the landscape plan was approved. So I think it's important to know that history and to refer to it. It basically, we're starting, as at least in the front, you need a new plan with all these as-built conditions recorded. And that the landscaping, if you want to mask any existing drains, utilities, or whatever, or screen them, everything has to be on the plan. So we're all looking at the same picture that's built.
I think the reality of the existing conditions married with the spirit of the original plan and the intent and the look of the original plan is what we're looking for.
I agree with you, Kathy. I think you did a good job of breaking down, even though you say it was piecemeal, it was giving Mr. Govan instruction as to each area and how it should be dealt with. And then we expect the plan to come back consistent with really what we talked about tonight.
Right. Okay.
Understood.
Okay. I think it's doable. Seem like a guy who knows what he's doing. So, okay. With that, that is the end of our meeting tonight. Does anybody else have anything they want to add? No? Okay, I need a motion then to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? We'll just do an all in favor.
Deja vu.
Aye.
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 Good night, everybody. Stay safe.
Good
Night.
Thank you.